down the air defense. And now we're getting topic, and we're using, as the president indicated, a lot more of the munitions, which we have in very plentiful supply. So I think we're going to be in good shape. And this, just, sir, I would.
So just to be clear, you think we're going to be in good shape for deterring China because we're bogged down in the Middle East with a war against Iran, and we're not using.
I think if we activate what the president and we are calling for, and with support from the Congress and better performance of the defense industry and better behavior and sort of contributions by allies, we're going to be in great shape.
So let me just ask: does that Operation Epic Fury deter China?
I think there's an argument that it can have some deterrent effect. Yes. Deterrence, yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, and yet for years you have argued that supporting Ukraine does not help deter China. So can you square that circle for us?
I can, because, I mean, first of all, I'm a public government official.
Mr. Colby, getting after our magazine depth problem is not shooting them all off in the Middle East, all right? I don't think that really helps. Now, look.
Things are getting tense. The war over the war is just heating up. And the actual war, the Iran war, is well underway. And contrary to what this administration continues telling the American people, it is very obvious that it will not be ending anytime soon. Let us just pray that Bridge is correct and that we can get these stockpile crises under control and that the American military can pull this thing out of the fire. Otherwise, this is going to end up being the greatest self-inflicted wound in the history of the United States of America. And I don't say that lightly. And now we're going to be shifting over to our continuing coverage of the wider implications of the war. We're bringing back two of our guests from yesterday, Dan Collins, who, as you know, he's been on many times with both myself. I'm Brandon Weichert, by the way. I'm the NatSec guy on Emerald.tv. Emerald is out on, she's out on a little leave right now as the world is preparing for a long running story of probably World War III. So she will be back with you on Monday, ready to roll with a lot of interesting news stories. Dan Collins is a guy with 25 years worth of experience running high-end factories in China. He's the host of a great podcast on YouTube called Chaos Incorporated. And of course, we're bringing back our buddy Brendan O'Reilly. He's the author, as I said yesterday, of one of our favorite books, Everyone is Wrong About China. Highly recommend that book. He lived in China for many years. He's a Mandarin speaker. This guy knows China, okay, better than any think tanker in D.C. or anybody at the Pentagon these days does. So why don't we bring in the panel, guys? And we're just going to open up here. It's looking like this war is not going to end anytime soon. I don't know if you had the opportunity, both of you guys, to listen to that clip from Bridge, who's the Undersecretary of War now, I guess, not Defense. But if you did, I'd love to hear your take. Dan, why don't you tell me, you have any thoughts on what that gentleman was saying?
I've noticed a media narrative that's been going around that we're trying to shift the causes or reasons for this war is not Israel. The same people that have been banging the table for years about attacking Iran. It's not them. It's 4D chess. We're playing 4D chess against China. It just doesn't. You're not playing 4D chess when you take the THAAD systems out of South Korea. When you take all the assets out of Asia, that's not 4D chess. And guess what? The only ships that look like they're going through the straits right now are Chinese cargo ships. So this is not 4D chess against China, but it is kind of a cover story. I've noticed the last few days that we're trying to shift it like we have this grand strategy globally. I don't see it. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with you, by the way, Dan. Brendan, what do you think about what you were hearing from Bridge and Seth Moulton, who's a Democrat congressman, I think from Massachusetts, but I do know Seth was a combat Marine who actually was one of the earliest detractors of the Iraq War. He was on the ground when the looting started. So whatever we may think about his politics, I have a lot of respect for the guy when it comes to stuff like this. Why don't you share with us your thoughts, Brendan?
Well, the idea that the Iran war that the U.S. has decided to start is going to deter China militarily is, it would be laughable if it weren't so tragic. Right now, the U.S. is rapidly depleting air defense munitions, the exact type of munitions they would need to defend Okinawa, South Korea, potentially Taiwan, in the event of some sort of war in the West Pacific. And not only is the U.S. rapidly depleting those air defense munitions, But also, let's think about what the war has shown from the offensive side with U.S. adversaries or potential U.S. adversaries. Iran has been able to target bases in Cyprus with drones and missiles. Cyprus is a lot farther from Iran than Okinawa is from mainland China. So part of the lesson that's being learned militarily here is if the Iranians can continue to effectively hit U.S. bases throughout the region, then with I should note, perhaps if we're being generous, 5% of China's relative military power. What happens to the U.S. bases in the hypothetical event of a war with China? We're basically being shown that they would be more or less entirely incapacitated within the first 24 hours of a conflict.
And Brendan, given your and excellent point. And Brendan, given your intelligence background, I'm gonna kick this over to you and ask you this. I was told on Brandon's show, he's got a wide array of guests that he brings in, and one of them is a former naval captain, very good guy, very nice guy. This is nothing personal, but he keeps saying this is basically a bunch of dead enders. That these missile commanders in Iran. I'm looking at this footage in the last 24 hours. This isn't looking like dead enders. What do you think? What do you think is going on? Is the regime nearing its death agonies, or are they in this for the long haul?
Well, let's think about the capabilities and motivations if you're an Iranian field commander right now. Why would you possibly surrender to the United States? What's the motivation for you? What's the upside? The upside is apparently the U.S. goal is to turn your country into a failed state like Libya. The upside is your missiles that you are currently launching. Part of the U.S. demands are the Iranians must give up all their missiles, and some of the war goals are now apparently we're going to take out all of their missile systems. Why wouldn't you keep launching them? Even if you do want to surrender eventually, you might as well launch all the missiles off first. So there's no, I struggle to fathom the strategic thinking on the U.S. side here of what they expected the Iranians to do in this situation, and I think really there's a complacent bubble in U.S. society, and certainly in a lot of places in the media right now that everything's fine, Iranian's going to surrender in a couple days, and I don't see it happening.
I agree. We are definitely at the start, not the middle or end of this thing. And the iterative process of warfare, again, just looking at some of these videos, these are not misfires. These are not desperate last stands. These seem like very coordinated, well-planned, well-executed, thanks to China's targeting assistance and their mass production capabilities. This is a very effective system. And Dan, you mentioned something. I want to get to you on this. You mentioned that the only ships that were safe so far going through the Strait of Hormuz are these Chinese container ships. Now that means neither the Iranian Navy or their ballistic missile forces nor the powerful U.S. Navy are willing to dare challenge the Chinese. So this already is reflective of a sea change in geopolitics, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a tanker was hit today, a few hours ago, a Dubai flag tanker. It's on fire. How many Chinese ships actually get through this chaos was still to be determined. But if anybody gets oil, it's going to be China, because China is the 800-pound gorilla, and the whole world needs their manufacturing products. So they have all the leverage. They have the money. They will bid the highest for oil. We're just starting to see as we're talking now, also the Bahraini oil and gas complex is on fire. Qatari Energy submitted force majeure yesterday. They shut down. South Korean chemical makers today issued force majeure. They're shutting down. Taiwan and South Korea have 9 days of LNG. Where's Taiwan even going to get their LNG? So the economic outcome is cascading as we talk, as the war goes on. So it's not a pretty picture.
It's not a pretty picture, and Drake, if you put up that clip, that tear I just sent you, it's from my newest. There, no, not that one, but that's okay. I did a report on Emerald.tv under the NatSec guy, in which I sort of walked through the prospects of $200 barrel. Over the next 5 weeks. Dan, do you think that's a likely or a far off prospect at this point, given what's going on now?
I think so we hit $100 oil in China last night. I think we're up around 80 as we speak now, 78, 79. $150 would be my base case. $200 is possible. Not a lot of people know China exports a huge amount of jet fuel, diesel fuel. China's built 275 refineries over the last 30 years. We've built zero. And this is why they always say at the end of the day, when the whole Ponzi scheme collapses, the guys left with the factories are going to win. And China knows this well, and that's what they've been focused on. So, you've got I'd say a full-on energy crisis ruling the markets right now. Asia is outbidding Europe. Europe has been celebrating. We got out of Russian gas in exchange for Qatari. Oh, it's shut down. So Europe's in huge trouble. Europe, I don't know what Europe's going to do. Honestly, if we're paying 150, or 200, I don't know what they're going to be paying. Is it maybe not?
They're going to be doing smoke signals soon in Europe, I think. That's right. So let me ask you one other thing, Dan, before I switch over again to Brendan. And Brendan, feel free to jump in anytime if you want to add in anything too. We're doing the Al Arabiya method here. Dan, what does $200 a barrel or $150 a barrel, what does it do, first of all, to you and I economically in America? And second of all, what does it do for the midterm elections? Because I want to make this very clear for the people at home. Why are you being so hard on Trump? It's because I support Trump. That's why I'm saying this is crazy. So go ahead, explain it.
So it starts to ripple through. We already have seen diesel prices go up in the United States pretty dramatically, right? Freight is going up. Now, when you ship a truckload from Chicago to wherever, call it, it's not $5,000, it's $10,000. And this spreads through everything Americans are going to buy. So it really hits at the diesel level, and it will spread through all the consumer goods. You're seeing home sales at worst on record. It's worse than the financial crisis, 2008. You're seeing credit markets, private credit rolling over. You're going to uncover a huge amount of fraud in there. So you're watching the AI bubble, which was already kind of, people are starting to question the narrative, but Gulf states were going to spend $30 billion on AI. I think that's happening. All the data centers just got bombed. So they're gonna be struggling for water and food. They're not gonna be worried about AI. So who knows where that tips into? But yeah, I think the American consumer, and this is also going to roll into rates. How are we going to reduce rates? What's going to happen is we're going to print a ton of money, like we do in every crisis. We just print a ton of money. We'll create more inflation. Things will get more costly. So it's not a pretty picture for American consumers. COVID-like supply chain crisis. Back in COVID, people were still working. They had masks and things. They still went to work. But in this situation, energy is getting taken offline, and it's getting taken offline for years. So this is, I think, at this point, unpredictable. But there's nothing there's nothing I see on the upside, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a very apt point. We made it yesterday when you and I were on. I want to make it again. This is very reminiscent of COVID. And in that case as well, it was a misstep policy-wise by President Trump. And we all tried to warn him, don't do something like this again, because it will come back on you and the country. And here we are. Brendan, how does China capitalize on this? How do they use this to their advantage?
The way things are playing out right now, they have a variety of options available to them, but one of them I want to emphasize is to do nothing and win. There's a famous quote by Napoleon, the famous quote, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. So my read of the situation, long term, is time was already on China's side. They were already building up their real productive capacities much faster than the United States. And now the United States government has decided to start this conflict in a very spectacular and escalatory way, which has made their adversary have no plausible or logical reason to back down, at least for several weeks. So what does Beijing need to do? They essentially need to do nothing. Now, that said, as the situation continues and likely deteriorates, then maybe they start to get a little bit tempted to capitalize on the situation geopolitically. And I also think it is worth mentioning that the Strait of Hormuz being more or less effectively closed, it's not great news for them economically. They are quite dependent on seaborne energy imports, but they're a lot less dependent than the main U.S. allies in the region, like Japan and South Korea. So the fact that they have these overland pipelines to Russia and Central Asia really puts them in a better position to weather this out, and not to mention the fact that they have a strategic oil reserve, which is, at least officially, twice as big as that of the United States. So really, there's a lot of options available to them, some of which are scarier to the U.S. than others, but they don't need to do anything to capitalize on the situation necessarily.
Yeah, and actually, so far it seems like you're, and I think Dan, I think you agree with that as well. Do you, or do you think that? Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's funny. All the China guys that I know who actually speak the language and lived over there are saying this, and everybody in D.C. who's never stepped foot in China is saying, "Oh my gosh, it's going to end now. This is where." Okay, so I think this is very important to keep in mind. The Chinese do nothing and still win. This is the great advantage. And I'll just say also here before we shift to the next phase of the conversation. Sun Tzu, and I'm paraphrasing now, but Sun Tzu said, always leave your enemy an avenue of escape. And this is a well-known, at least it used to be in the U.S. military, a well-known phrase and a well-known teaching. We seem to have forgotten it in our rush to war. And now, who knew? The Iranians are in a fanatical position now because they're cornered and they're not going to stop. They have no incentive to stop. So China does nothing and wins. Now, I know you guys are not, well, I know you guys are not necessarily Russia experts, but I mean, it's all sort of in the same part of the world. Dan, what do you think how are the Russians going to benefit? Obviously, I gave a speech in D.C. in 2017 in which I said the only one who benefits from an Iran war is Russia because of the high prices of oil. What say you to that, and what is Russia, do you think, going to do 2 and 3 moves down the line now?
Is that war still going on? It's disappeared from my Twitter feed.
Everybody took their flags and their bios now, and they have the Israeli flag now, or the Persian flag.
Well, I think you'll see is continuation of the current, because the same thing. Why change your tactics when you're winning? You know, the real kill ratios between Russia and Ukraine are dramatic. They may be 10-1, they may be 20-1. It's basically just Russia lobbing fabs on Ukrainian positions. Yeah. I think that'll continue. There'll be another big offensive. We have seen Russian technology now show up in these Iranian drones, especially with helping them maneuver and evade electronic warfare. So I think where Russia ends up is, right before all this kicked off, we saw Kiev lose power. We see Odessa lose power. They have no power left. It's already 7-year wait to get a transformer in the United States. How much electrical infrastructure?
Built in China.
Yeah, they're all from wage-high power. We're dependent on wage-high power out of China to build up our AI system. How much is Ukraine going to get to rebuild it and then just get struck again? It's not going to happen. So they're basically out of power, not just this year, but like forever until Russia takes it over. So eventually to make a long story short, Russia will eventually take Odessa at the very least. It'll roll all the way up the Dnieper River. It'll probably at this point take Kiev, because we give them, we don't give them an off ramp. We don't give them a choice.
That's right.
We just keep saying we're going to strike long range into their territories. And they say, okay, then I need to push the battle space farther back. So we take more territory. Yeah. End of the day, it's been, since you've been saying from beginning, I've been saying from beginning, they want the ethnic Russian areas. They're going to protect the ethnic Russians. They're not going to turn these people back over to Zelensky. Those people want to be Russian. Some people have had Russian passports for more than a decade, like the Crimeans. And instead of being adults in the room, we have just continued this proxy war. And, now with this Iranian situation, probably this is not looking like a great idea that we've been wasting our ammunition and time on for the last 4 years.
Well, and that's the key. And you saw Brendan. Well, I just want to also just add here. You guys might get a kick out of this. Yesterday, apparently, the U.S. is now asking the Ukrainians to give us some of the air defense batteries, and Zelensky is saying there has to be strings attached. He won't do it unless there are strings attached. You got to love these allies of ours. So Brendan. Yeah. I actually just forgot what I was going to ask you, but we're seeing the sort of the transition to a Eurasian sort of order, dare I say it. What do you think happens to our stockpiles, our critical stockpiles? You saw Seth Moulton interrogating my buddy Bridge Colby, who I by the way, Bridge is a very good man and he's in a very hard spot. I just want to say that. I do not envy him. I think I would rather be shot than have that job right now. But somebody's got to do it. But Seth is asking him, Congress, the Moulton is asking him about these stockpiles. I've been warning about this. I think you've been warning about this too, Brendan. What do you think is going to happen, let's say, after day 12 of this war? And how are we going to keep fighting? I mean, we're running out of missiles. What do we do? Where do we go?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of these air defense munitions specifically require rare earths materials, and the United States is under effectively a partial embargo. The Chinese are controlling what the U.S. always called dual-use technology. So the Chinese are essentially not allowing rare earths exports that they believe will be used by the U.S. military to replenish things like air defense munitions. So what happens after day 12? I don't know. It's not going to be pretty one way or another, but as I said before, like the Iranians have every strategic and, as far as I can see, tactical reason to keep fighting, in that they are probably not as worried about their supplies of missiles and drones as the U.S. and Israel are about their supplies of air defense munitions. I might be wrong about that. Look, there's a fog of war. First casualty is always the truth. And certainly the U.S. and Israel have been working hard to especially take down the missile launchers. So there might be some success. There might be some tactical success on the U.S. side in that front. But the real question is the drones. The drones are what the Iranians are using to effectively close the Strait of Hormuz. They have something like 80,000 of those. No one knows exactly for sure. Probably the Iranians don't even know because they've distributed everything. It's all local commanders, literally probably in caves, because the entire country is a mountain range, lobbying off these drones for as long as they physically can. So let's talk about the timeline. I think it's really revealing that U.S. officials have continuously pushed the timeline back further and further and further.
Yes.
There was hope on the U.S. side that you take out the Ayatollah and his entire family, and other top commanders, and then the entire government collapses, everyone just gives up. That obviously did not happen. Now, that's not to say that there also wasn't a plan B and C, but, the initial aim of doing such a spectacular attack that everyone gives up, or the command structure collapses, that did not work. Because the Iranians were preparing for that. Because the Iranians have known that this war could come at any time.
Yep.
So, again, it's revealing to me, you had Trump, I think it was the second day of the war, mentioned something about 4 weeks. Hegseth now has said 8 weeks. There's indications with the way U.S. troops are being deployed, like Iran experts to certain bases. They're talking about, I think it's 100 days.
100 days.
But the timeline keeps getting pushed further and further back. And that's generally not a good sign in any conflict, but certainly not in a conflict that is draining some of America's most important weapon systems.
And Dan, and that's exactly, this is everything I've been saying, and I think Dan, you've been saying similar things.
Yep.
And so Dan, this war, you mentioned Europe in the context of Russia, but Europe is basically done. They're cooked. I mean, they're completely cooked. Are they? Is the plan? Do you think that the Trump administration is going to try to force them to buy more U.S. LNG and oil, transshipping it across the Atlantic, which is more expensive though? Can we even, as an oil producer, handle that kind of new demand? Because I'm assuming that's where this is going.
Yeah, that's exactly what the strategy was with the cutting off the Russian energy supplies. But to your point, how much more swing capacity is there? Probably not. It's probably not much to support any additional. And the more you export, drives up your prices here at home, right? That's less right. Material. I would point out too the discussion that you guys were just talking about on the rare earth. That gets all the headlines, but Raytheon and Lockheed Martin have told you the foundation of the entire defense supply chain is built on Chinese suppliers. They have thousands of Chinese suppliers. When you go back, tier 1, tier 3 component level, sensors, castings, forgings, chemicals, the entire defense industrial base is built off Chinese suppliers. So if we end up we celebrate cutting their oil off, who do you think is going to get stuff? Them, or are they going to just shut off their exports? So this is all crazy. I mean, it's Europe, and to your point on Europe, I honestly, their chemical producers like BASF, they've been leaving. They put $10 billion into China the last couple of years. The steel makers, the cement makers, Volkswagen has closed 3 plants, the first time in like 100 years they've ever closed a facility. They're cycling downward on themselves, and at this point, I don't see any way out for them.
Yeah, it's really, and now the Canadians are saying, we don't like what Trump's doing, but we're going to go attack as well, Iran. So this is, the alliance structure. I've always been told, Brendan, the alliance structure of America, the post-war alliance structure, is the key to our success. It looks like the only people being injured are ourselves and all of our allies. Is this the end of the U.S.-led alliance structure globally?
Well, I think you need to look at it from 2 or maybe even 3 angles, right? Because you have NATO, obviously, in North America and Europe. And I think this war is helping to undermine or create fractures within NATO. Already you have a big political blowout between the United States and Spain, because the Spanish government has said, we want nothing to do with this, and we will not support even your logistics for the U.S. getting over there, because the Spanish Prime Minister has said he considers this war to be illegal. So the Spanish are not very happy about it, obviously. If you see the support that the U.S. has gotten from, say, the UK and France and Germany, it's decently limited. They're not launching airstrikes into Iranian territory, at least not yet. But they are helping protect the Gulf countries. I think another really important point to make here about this particular conflict in terms of NATO is with Turkey. Turkey is the one U.S. ally, the one country in the region that has U.S. military bases that the Iranians have not targeted. And to me, that is extremely significant because I'm sure you saw the reports yesterday, which some of it ended up being fake news. The Iranian Kurds are moving over the border from Iraqi Kurdistan into Iran, and the U.S. is going to support them in this grand offensive into northwest Iran. Obviously, I think the U.S. is still supporting these separatist Kurdish groups in Iran, but guess who doesn't like that very much? It's the second most powerful NATO military, which belongs to Turkey. To them, that is an existential threat. So I think that is exactly the reason that the Iranians have not targeted, or apparently not targeted, anything in Turkey yet. But going back to the broader implications for U.S. alliances around the world, NATO is obviously the strongest and the biggest, and then you have these other, I mean, it's not even really necessarily a formal alliance, right? There's no mutual defense obligations, as far as I'm aware, publicly between the U.S. and Middle Eastern countries,
Right.
including, I believe, Israel. But I mean, there's all sorts of defense sharing. Maybe that's not exactly explicit, but if you look at where the U.S. had bases, right? UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. Um, this war and the fact that they have U.S. military bases in their countries has not benefited them. It has
No.
been an enormous cost to them. So surely other countries acting as rational states generally are looking at that and thinking, well, maybe the cost of hosting U.S. bases is far higher than the benefit. And this could even, it's a bit of a stretch, but I think this could start to factor into the strategic thinking in U.S. allies in the West Pacific, like South Korea and Japan. Now, of course, they still want U.S. help. They want to balance against China because China is by far the strongest regional country. But the cost benefit analysis, you really have to think about that, especially if, as is currently being proven in the real world, these U.S. military bases are extremely vulnerable to missile and drone swarms, of which I'm sure the Chinese have built up as many as they possibly can, and that's going to be a lot.
It's all part of their A2AD, anti-access area denial program. And I want to just ask Dan, building off of what Brendan said, you also not only lived in China, but you have a lot of connectivity to Taiwan as well. There is a rising, I don't agree with her on everything, but this leader in Taiwan, I'm forgetting her name, the leader of the Kuomintang, she's a very impressive young woman, younger woman. I think she's in her 40s. I think she went to Cambridge. She's a lawyer. And she's basically making the case that Brendan's making, and this was before this whole thing kicked off in Iran. Where do you think this is going specifically for Taiwan? Are we going to always have this unsinkable carrier, or is this thing going away?
So I just came back from Taiwan. I was there a couple of weeks ago. And it always shocks me that when you're there, actually, they're not worried about China at all. They don't care. If you'd ask them, I mean, they care, but it's not their top of their daily concern. They're busy making money. Their GDP's up 9%. The TSMC is exploding the economy because of the chips. But where those GPUs are going to come from now when they're running out of LNG, we'll see. They are mostly concerned on the economics, their demographics, which look horrible. But Taiwan, at the end of the day, is not defendable. Okay, you can take a train from the top to the bottom in 3 hours. Everyone lives on the West Coast. And if you talk to them, and I have a lot of friends that are very high level people, and they'll tell you, we're not going to fight. I mean, nobody wants to see Taipei get destroyed, which is what would happen. Right.
Like Tehran.
There's a much greater probability of China fighting Japan than I think actually kinetic energy on Taiwan. Doesn't mean there wouldn't be an embargo or something, but I don't think they want to fight. The Chinese don't want to fight Chinese. They definitely want to fight Japanese if if that comes down to it. That is in their mentality. They're kind of waiting for an excuse to punch Japan in the face, unfortunately. They just put the economic kind of shadow warfare on them with dual use export bans. I mean, the Japanese technology sector is almost everything's banned now. Almost everything's classified as dual use. They're heavily dependent on Chinese inputs into the electronic space, and they've now been shut off. So Taiwan's not defendable. They won't fight when it comes down to it. You can see that in their defense spending. They're not spending the money. They're not arming their citizens. The demographics on Taiwan, when I moved to China in 1998, and I lived there over 20 years, the average age in Taiwan was 29 years old. Today is 45. By the year 2030, a few years away, it'll be 51 years old, the average age. So when I was just there a couple of weeks ago, everyone's talking about this demographic crisis. Like, what are we going to do? Like, everybody's getting older. So that's their main threat. But geopolitically, we need to keep out of this to keep things stable over there while we deal with everything else.
So we're in our last 30 seconds. I'm going to ask both of you a very quick question, and then we got to bounce. The same question for both of you. Brendan, where do you think it's going for this country in the Iran war, do you think we're going to be able to declare a victory and have this thing end anytime soon? Or are we now permanently mired in another Middle East forever war?
I think the United States can declare victory anytime they want, but it will the Iranians agree? I think the Iranians are going to keep lobbing missiles and drones at least for several weeks. I would say at least till early April to, air quotes, defeat Trump's 4-week guideline. But I don't think that this war will benefit the United States geopolitically whatsoever.
Okay, I agree. And what about you, Dan? Where are you thinking this is heading?
I think eventually, if to get out of this war right now, we need to get out. We need to declare a victory. We took out their leadership. Iran, that won't stop Iran, but what could happen is Israel will threaten tactical nukes on Tehran, and maybe there's a backroom deal done where everybody stops because it's getting mission critical at that point.
And perhaps the Russians step in and bring some sense into the whole scenario, because right now we're not the sensible player. Okay, well, this has been a phenomenal panel. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. I'm sure when Emerald's back in the hot seat, she's going to call on you at some point in the coming weeks, so be available, please. We're going to be right back with Todd Wood talking about Azerbaijan and the Kurds. Please stand by for 2 minutes. This is The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm Brandon Weichert. Don't you dare touch that dial.